Hey everyone, Melanie Allen here, Emerald Ambassador. So excited to have Certified John Maxwell Coach on tonight for Chapter 2 for 15 Invaluable Laws of Growth, the Law of Awareness. So we're so excited to hear from Chad tonight and to learn from him and to grow. So without further ado, Chad, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Thanks for your kind words and encouragement, truly. Well, let's pray. Father, thank you for tonight. Thank you for the privilege of being in your presence together with my brothers and sisters, Lord. Thank you for technology. Lord, most of all, thank you for your presence in our life. Thank you for the purpose that you've given each of us. Thank you for the passion and the joy that we have in your purpose. And God, I pray that we would all just come to a greater awareness of what that purpose truly is in our life, Lord, so we can walk that out and live that out and talk that out every day on earth. God, I pray that we would learn to be still and to know you and to hear you, God, so we can better understand ourselves. And Lord, that's really what awareness is about, is Lord, that we take the time to look in. So Lord, just teach us how to do that better. And bless our time tonight. Thank you for those that are on the call, and thank you for those that will listen to the call. I pray that it'll be uplifting and encouraging and inspiring, God, because you need us to reach our potential, to have the greatest impact that we can for you on earth. And God, we all want to do that. So we give you this time tonight. It's in your name, Jesus. Amen. Well, hello, everyone. So thumbs up, thumbs down, having a great week. Excited for school to start. Your kids are like so excited about school, I hope, right? Well, it's an honor to be with all of you again tonight. Before we go forward, remember, I always like to look backwards a little bit. So if you remember, last week was the law of intentionality. And so when I think about the law of intentionality, I think of those one-word reminders like purpose. Intentionality means we do things on purpose. And we do those things today, not tomorrow. We do it now, not later. We don't do it when we feel like it, but we do it and then we begin to feel more like it. And so I hope you're finding some traction with what intentionality can look like in your life. I'm guessing some of you have some success stories, and we're going to open up for discussion in just a little bit. And I'd love to hear how you're gaining traction, not just with awareness, but how you're also gaining traction with your intentionality. They go hand in hand. And I think if I were to sum up the law of awareness tonight, it would be that on purpose, today, that we stop and consider where we are. I'm guessing with school starting, some of you have been to the mall recently. And if they still have them, you know, the marquees in the mall where it has the map, and you go up and you find the spot that says what? You are here. And if you think about that map, you know, we can't go to the store we want to find unless we figure out where we are. And we can't really find the deeper purpose in our life for today until we figure out where we are today. And so the big key to awareness is that we stop and consider and reflect and pause to find out where we are and who we are today. We can't really change where we've come from, but it's good to know where we've come from. But before we can go forward, we have to know who we are and where we are. And that's a big piece to the law of awareness. So I hope, like me, I'm trying to make that more of a discipline in my life. That's part of my individual growth plan, is to stop every day and reflect. Most days I do, but some days I don't. But I hope that becomes a habit for all of us, because it's a crucial ingredient to growth. And so I hope that you find some encouragement in this law. It's packed with a lot of information. And so let's dive in. What I thought I would do is just kind of walk through the chapter and try to hit some highlights. I want the flow to be smooth. And so let me do just a little bit of teaching and reinforcing. I know you're making notes and drawing pictures in your book, so I look forward to hearing your comments. But let me just hit some highlights and we'll just roll on if that's okay. So law of awareness. You have to know yourself to grow yourself. How many of us really like to look in the mirror and take a deep dive in? We're all going to nod and say yes, right? But sometimes that's not a really fun thing to do. Sometimes that's not a real easy thing to do. But I'm finding a lot of freedom in the law of awareness, because it's okay where we are. God has a purpose where we are. And he has even a greater purpose of where he wants to take us. And so if you really think about it, growth is realizing our potential, is maximizing our potential. The step from purpose to potential starts with awareness, and it starts with understanding where we are. And so I find a lot of encouragement in this law. I love the reminder of the movie, The 50 First Dates. Did any of you rewatch that after you read this in the book? Isn't that a great movie? There's some days I wish I had that mindset, where I had no recall. Any of you like that? But if you think about it, man, there's a miss there. You know, there's a miss on a new day. There's a miss on building upon today. There's a miss on building upon yesterday, because that's how we really start to gain momentum in our life. If we learn from today and build on today, that makes tomorrow even better. And so awareness is a good place to start with that, is where we stop and ponder and consider. And so I appreciated his reminder about that movie. I love that movie, especially where he's tied up with ropes on the side of the road. That's always a fun scene for me. But then one of the first questions in the book is, do you have a sense of direction? Do you know where you are? You know, how many of us truly go through the day and it's 8:30 at night, like right now, and we have no idea what happened today? We know we just got here. We know we're in a chair. We know we think we may not even be on the right call. Have you ever thought that before? I mean, you show up and you're thinking, okay, why am I here? We live busy lives. Any of y'all experience busyness? We all do. And I don't know that busyness is always productivity. And so I think learning to even distinguish between busyness and productivity, awareness is a key ingredient in that factor. But asking ourselves, where are we going? Who are we today? That's a big question. Let's go through. He talks about there's 3 kinds of people in the world, and I'd love to see which of these resonates with you the most. I hope that we all end up being number 3. This is one time we don't want to be number 1, right? Because we don't want to be people who don't know what they would like to do. You know those people? You may be in that spot today. Number 1 may be your name. And that's okay, because hopefully in this process, we're going to figure out some direction for ourselves and figure out some direction. But phase 1, number 1, is basically a state of confusion. And I'm guessing some of us, if we were really honest, we may be the name if we filled in that blank. But do you know some people who are just truly confused? And I'm not just talking about preteens or teenagers. I'm talking about adults. There are a lot of people walking around the planet who truly don't know why they're here. And they truly don't know where they're going. And I cross paths with those people on a more frequent basis than I'd like to admit, frankly. So it's key to know that we're not going to be just drifters, it talks about. We're not going to be people just blown and tossed around by the wind, if you will. I want to be a person who has a focus and has a target and has a direction. But there are people who don't know what they would like to do, and they're confused. Another category of people are who know what they want to do, but they don't do it. Now, that's a level of frustration for a lot of us, right? I mean, how many of you know you have your target and you have the gun and you just don't pull the trigger? I mean, how many of us sit on wait? How many of us sit on I should? Or how many of us sit on, not yet, right? And that's a level of frustration for a lot of people. So I don't know if you're there or not, but a big key to that piece, if you read it really carefully, is a lot of times we're not willing to pay the price to make that choice. We know what we need to do. We see it. We smell it. We can reach out and touch it, but we just don't pay the price. We don't have the discipline or the strength to say yes and take that step. That's a very frustrating place. I lived in that place recently for about 6 months, wanting to resign from a great place. The place wasn't frustrating. I just knew I had a call on my life that was calling me to go into the speaking leadership thing. And I stayed in the land of frustration because it was comfortable. I mean, how silly is that, right? I would rather stay in the land of frustration. Come on, Chad. But I did for about 6 months. Man, once I took that step, it was very liberating. So there is a state of frustration for people in category 2. The third place is where I hope we all will be. And some of you are already there and you can teach us how to do this. but you know what you want to do and you're doing it. I mean, that is the home run zone that hopefully we can all live in and not turn back from. So those are the three categories that he talked about. And if you think about the last phase, that's where I think we find the most fulfillment. It doesn't mean we've arrived when we get to that place, because what I'm learning about life is once we climb one mountain and we get to the top, if you look a little further, there's another one, right? Growth is a never-ending process. It's a lifelong journey. But category 3 is really where we're thriving and where we're most fulfilled. So those are 3 categories to just consider where you are in those. You're in one of those. I don't know that there's another category. I think those pretty much capture it all. So we're either confused, we have no clue, or we're frustrated, we know, but we're just not willing to make the commitment, or we're in that thriving zone of where we know it and we're doing it. One of the things I love about this chapter is that it starts to talk about connecting your passion with your purpose. And if you look on page 19, I love one of the statements. It's in the second or third paragraph. It says, you have to know who you are to grow your potential, but you have to grow in order to know who you are. I mean, think about that for a second. We have to grow to reach our potential, but do we know who we can fully be today? Do any of you feel like you're even using 10% of your potential? You know, I think we shared last call or the first call, Harvard research. I read it again this past week. 10% of the population has any form of growth plan. So you're in the top 10%, by the way. Going through this book, you're setting yourself apart. But how many of those, even in that 10% category, how many of us have really reached at least 10% of our potential? I don't think we have a clue as to how gifted and talented we are in God's name. I don't think we know how fearfully and wonderfully we've been made. I know I don't. I'm still trying to discover that, and that's a very exciting process. So growth is kind of an inspiring thing in and of itself. Let's look at there's 10 truths here that he talks about. And I want to just hit 3 highlights on page 21. He talks about if you're going to tap into your passion, he has a formula there. It's energy plus excellence. How many of you today on a scale of 1 to 10 would say your energy level to grow is above a 5? Just show me a finger. Show me your hand. Are most of us above a 5 with having the energy to do this growth thing? Do most of you feel excited about growing? Or is there a lot of drudgery? Oh my gosh, I've got to read chapter 2. I don't want to grow. But I mean, what's your energy level like? It takes energy to grow. Because remember, growth doesn't just happen. It happens with our purpose and our intentionality. And so energy is a key factor. And how many of you want to grow with excellence? How many of you want to be 10 out of 10 on your wheel of life? Or are you going to be satisfied with a 2? You know, most people who choose to grow also choose to not be just mediocre. They choose to be excellent. And I think that's a key formula there that I hope you caught on page 21. There's 3 truths, though, he also talks about if we're going to really find and harness our passion. I love these. He said, you will never fulfill your destiny doing work that you despise. Now, it's a loaded question to ask some of you. Are you doing what you feel called to do today? Are you in your happy zone? Are you in your thrive zone? Are you in your I love what I do zone? I hope so. Have you ever been out of that zone where you've had work to do that you just despise it and it's total drudgery? You been there? Which do you prefer? We want to be in our happy zone, right? In our thrive zone. We will never fulfill our passion if we're doing work that we don't desire, that we despise. Another truth that I want you to remember as we're trying to figure out this whole passion and purpose thing, passion gives you an advantage. I don't know how many of you have been in competitive sports or even competitive academics. There are a lot of forms of competition. Can you tell the competitors who want to be on the field? Can you tell the competitors in the band concerts who want to make first chair? Can you tell the competitors who want to reach their sales goals? It shows up. You can't fake passion. You just can't. You can't manufacture it. I believe it comes from within, from a very deep place. And if we're going to truly grow, we've got to connect with that passion inside of us. And it gives us a great advantage as we continue to grow and reach our potential. And then passion itself gives us energy. I hope your kids love school, those of you who have school-age kids. I hope their excitement is because they can't wait to go to school and learn. I know you're going to have to bribe them. You're going to have to like trick them and dangle carrots at some point, right? But I have no doubt you've seen passion come alive in your kids. And I know we've all seen it come alive in ourselves. And a lot of times it takes a step of awareness to assess where we are with our passion. And I think there's a key connection there for us in this chapter. There's definitely, it says, a direct connection between finding your passion and reaching your potential. There's a direct line. One of the things I caught in this chapter, and we can't go into a lot of depth, but I want to just plant the seed. Do you listen to your heart more, or do you listen to your head more when you're trying to make decisions or when you're trying to grow? Do you listen to your head, or do you listen to your heart? I think there's a time to listen to both. But I think when you talk about the wellspring of life, the Bible talks a lot about from our heart, the very core of us. And I think that's where passion is given birth. And I think that's where the Lord plants those seeds of potential in us, that he starts to water those things, if we'll let him. You know, growth is a choice. And so it's exciting to think about if we start watering those seeds within our passion, man, what's going to happen in all of our lives? What's going to happen within our families? What's going to happen within our business? What's going to happen with our kids? It's exciting to know that we can set passion free if we choose to start growing and reaching our potential. Let's look on page 23. And these are some questions that we need to ask ourselves, because part of this chapter is talking about where we want to go. And I don't know if you were the kid in third grade that knew you would be doing what you're doing today, or any of y'all those kiddos. We talk about this, I'm still trying to figure out what I'm going to do someday. So it's a constant awareness process and reflection process for Chad. And I enjoy the journey most days. But these are some questions that we need to ask ourselves if we're going to truly tap into our gifts and our passions, because this chapter starts to explore what are our passions. You know, I would love to think that I could have been a pro baseball player. I had the passion. I had the determination. I just didn't have the skills. I got to college and I was a scholarship athlete and I got really close, but I didn't have the skills to make it to the major leagues. Right now, there was a time in my life that I would have loved to have been a pro football player. My dad was a college football player. I didn't have the skills there either. So passion is not fantasy land. I think growing our potential, seated in our passion, is where we align our gifts and our strengths and our talent with that energy inside that we feel, that passion that we feel. I think there is an alignment. I think that's God's design for us. And so passion doesn't mean, hey, if you just want to be good at something, you just have to love it. Well, there has to be some connection to love and capacity and ability. And these are some questions that we start to ask ourselves to help connect the dots between what's realistic in our life. What have we been gifted in? What are our true talents? I would love to think I could stand up and sing in church. I just don't have it, right? I have a heart for it. I love to sing and make noise, but God did not gift me as a musician, right? So for me to be at my best, doing my best every day, I want to learn what my passion is matched to my strengths and my abilities. So these are some questions on page 23 that are really pretty challenging to answer. I hope you spent some time on these. Number one, it says, do you know the difference between what you want and what you're good at? How many of you have ever taken, I'm going to hold up an assessment. How many of you have ever taken an assessment like the Strengths Finder or a DISC profile or a 360 feedback? There are instruments out there that can give you insights into some of your tendencies behaviorally. Some people call them personality tests. I mean, there are some ways to assess. There's even a spiritual gift inventory. I've taken one of those before that's really interesting. There's a way through awareness to use a tool like that that will help you gain clarity in what your true gifts and abilities are. Now, I don't know I'm learning more and more what my talents are, and I don't mean that boastfully. I know the range of my abilities better and better as I've matured. I know that speaking and coaching and training is in the lane. I obviously have a long way to go, but I'm gaining some traction there. I get a lot of good feedback there. I still have a hunger there. But I can't go do other things. Like, I am not a financial planner. I am not an accountant. I'm not a lot of things. And so coming to a greater awareness of what my strengths are, and sometimes using a tool like the Strengths Finders or the DISC, it can be helpful to connect those dots. Or like me, obviously I'm biased about coaching. If you've ever been to a life coach or a career coach, there are instruments to help people connect the dots between what they're really good at and what they're passionate about. So I just want to plant that seed for you. If you're really stuck on knowing what you're good at, there's some resources out there that can be helpful. Another helpful tool along those lines are people that love and trust, that you can love and trust. I mean, how many of you ask for feedback from people? You know, if you're really struggling with, man, I'm not really sure what I want to do with this, ask people around you. They know you, they see you. Ask them for truthful feedback. And so that can even be another way to enhance clarity between what you're really good at and what your passion is. Another question when you're thinking about what your passion is and what your purpose is, trying to align those things, is, do you know what drives you and what gives you satisfaction? Now, again, I'm a little kid at heart, and I'd love to go play in the woods all day. If I could make a living just playing in the woods all day, I'd be there. Or hunting, I love to hunt. I have not figured out a way to make a living hunting, right? So it's not about fantasy land. It's about connecting your potential and your passion with your gifts and your skills. But what gets you excited when you wake up every day? You know, I call them happy feet. When my feet hit the ground every day, I feel like my passion drives me towards leaders. My passion drives me towards pouring into people. My passion drives me towards serving. That's my zone. That's what gets me excited. When I wake up and I know I get to do that, I'm ready. Do you have those things? Do some of you know when your feet hit the ground what you get excited doing? You get excited about sharing your plexus? You know, can you share plexus if you're not excited about it? Is that just a job? I don't know that you can manufacture a passion to share something like plexus. I think people, first of all, would see right through it. And second of all, I think you'd be miserable trying to share something you don't believe in, right? So I hope you have a sense of what your feet get happy about. Or when your eyes open in the morning, what do you look forward to? That's a part of your passion speaking to you. That's a part of your passion driving you towards more of your potential. So sometimes we have to stop and ask ourselves, what gives us energy? What drives us? And then thirdly, do you know what your values and priorities are? I mean, do you think about that ever? Do you know does your family have core values? If you work in an organization outside the home, does your organization have core values? Does Plexus have core values? I think so, right? Do you align with the business priorities and the business values within Plexus? Because part of the truth in this chapter is, if your passion and your purpose don't align with your activities, there's a big disconnect. And it could mean you're off track. It could mean you're not able to get the traction that you could gain if you align your passion with your potential, with your activities, with your priorities, because that's what we know gives us the greatest results. So again, this step to stop and gain awareness, it ensures that we're on the right track. I can tell you another story. Recently, I was asked to consider something that it was leadership and it was service at a very high level. And when I was first approached about it, it sounded really, really good. And for about the last 2 weeks, I've really explored it. But my amazing wife and people that I've been seeking counsel from have basically come back and challenged me to say, Chad, does that align with the call on your life? Does that align with your passion? Does that align with your purpose? Does that align with your priorities? And to fast forward and answer that question, no. So I'm not going to do that. So it's a very common process for us to have to stop and make sure that we're on the right track. It doesn't take much to get us off track. You know, those of you who know geography, if we are going north and we take just a 2-degree turn, you know, initially we don't feel much difference. But if you stay 2 degrees off for very long, where do you end up? If you're shooting for Dallas, you may land in Midland, right? So as you stop and consider what your passion is and what your purpose is, make sure you're aligning your activities with that purpose, because that alignment is where you're going to reach the fastest growth and the fastest way to reach your potential. Let's look at, let's see. I want to make sure we have plenty of time to talk. There's a lot of great stuff in this chapter. Let me turn with me to page 28. And I'm going to give us a chance to go back and catch some things that I'm skipping over. I'm just trying to hit some highlights, some things that stuck out with me. On page 28, there's a list of things there that talks about once you've discovered what you want to do, start finding people who do what you want to do with excellence. As you go through this process of discovering your passion and your purpose, I'm finding as part of my growth plan, I try to hang out with people that I respect and admire, especially in the field of leadership for someone who's trying to do leadership. I bribe them with breakfast. I try to go sit at their feet and learn from them. But these are some things that are required of us if we're really going to be serious about pursuing our passion and pursuing our potential and being willing to stop and look in. This is a great checklist here on page 28. Are you willing to be committed to this growth process? I mean, has this study cost you any time this week? I know none of you crammed at 6:30 tonight for the call, right? I mean, you've been reading this book all week long, right? I'm teasing. I mean, this should be part of our daily regimen, right? To read and study. That's part of the growth plan, that we do this every day. This isn't just not a 15-week course. This is a pattern we're trying to develop in our life. So we have to be committed about it. And you're showing that commitment by being on the call and showing up. People who show up will grow. And people who show up will go up, I believe Melanie said. I love that. But we have to be willing to pay the cost and pay the price. Also, as you're seeking people to mentor you and coach you and learn from, I would say do it on a really consistent basis. You know, I believe we are, if you've ever heard of the law of attraction, if you've ever talked to your kids about being careful who they hang out with, I think the people that we hang out with do rub off on us, just like we rub off on other people. And so if you want to be green and growing, hang out with people who are green and growing. If you want to be ripe and rotting, hang out with people that are rotting. I mean, I know that's kind of gross, but there's a lot of truth to that. We have to be consistent with this growth thing, because this growth thing, it affects our actions, but it also affects our attitude, and it's so contagious. Another thing that I hope you start to see is that there's a lot of room to be creative in this. This is just one book on growth. There are 1,000 books on growth. I'm a little biased. I think this is a great place to start. But be creative in this process. You don't have to be locked into just one track. So try to get after we complete the study, continue that growth study. Look for some other books that talk about personal growth. This is a real tough one for me. It says here to be purposeful in your interactions with people. How many of you have ever had a coach before, by the way? If you want to admit that out loud, right? I have a coach now. When you go to meet with someone, do you prepare for that time just like you prepared for the call tonight? Yes, you did. You've been studying all week. You've done the homework. You've spent time reflecting. You've done the supplemental guides. We have to be purposeful in our growth. We can't just show up. We have to be prepared. So when I go for a coaching session, every session leaves me with the next step. And my coach is named Bob. So every time I meet with him, I have homework. And out of respect to him, I show up having done my homework. I mean, I have to be purposeful in between the sessions, just like you have to be purposeful during the week as you read this study. Another key to this whole awareness thing is really to be reflective on a regular basis. And I don't know if you were able to measure that in time this week, but in reading this chapter, does it cause you to think about how much time you really do spend just thinking and reflecting? I'd love to say I spend 2 hours a day. Excuse me. Some days it's great if I do 10 minutes. But what if I traded some of my TV time for some reflective time? Ooh, or what if I could diminish the blue tone on my face if I put my phone down for a little while every day and just shut that off and spent some time reflecting? You see the blue tint? We're all going to have blue faces one day, right? But what if I just traded a little bit of my time on my phone for a little bit of quiet time? I sit in my truck a lot. I have a lot of meetings right now, and that's some of my most quiet space. And I just park, and I park away from the crowd, and I just sit there. And that's some of my sweetest time right now, reflecting, is in my truck. So we have to be disciplined with reflecting. And then how many of you have an attitude of gratitude about this growth thing? I mean, how many of you really have stopped to think, wow, it's a privilege to grow. It's a blessing to grow. This isn't a have to. It's a I got to, right? If I'm saying that right. I mean, this isn't I'm doing this because I want to. I'm thankful that God's given me enough potential that I haven't arrived yet. I mean, how boring would that be if we reach our potential by the age 12? I think it's exciting to know, and I'm thankful to know that I still have a long way to grow. And so those are just some things to keep in mind within our attitudes as we pursue mentorship and coaching from other people's examples. Because ultimately, we're going to be those people, if not already. I have no doubt people are coming to you now, I would think. They're coming to you saying, man, tell me more about this growth thing you're doing. How are you doing that, Julie and Ann and Melanie and Jacqueline? How are y'all growing? Tell me about that. Because we're going to be examples for a lot of other people. Because growth shows up. You can't hide growth. People are going to say, I want some of that. And so you're going to become those mentors and those coaches that we're reading about in this book. And that's an exciting privilege. We've talked about once we learn it ourselves, that's when we start living it. But that's also when we start teaching it. So as you learn these disciplines and these habits of growth, like the habit of reflection, like the habit of self-awareness, you're going to be able to teach that skill and that discipline to other people. That's a very, very privileged thing to do. Let's see. I think that's what I wanted to highlight. And I've babbled long enough. I wanted to hit some things that spoke to me. And so what I'd like to do now, Melanie, I skipped a lot of different things in here. I'm sure some of you caught or highlighted some other things about the law of awareness. So let's hear from you. I'd much rather hear from you anyway than myself babble. So someone share something that you caught in this chapter, something I missed, something you'd like to add to. But let's hear from you a little while.
I'm never at a loss for words. I wanted to share one of my favorite quotes of all time. Is there are two great days in a person's life: the day you were born and the day you discover why. I just think that's so critical, because that's what drives us. That's what keeps, makes me stay up late, committed to whatever obligations I have, to stay connected to the dream. Because when you have your strong why, you figure out how. And so that's from, also, if you guys haven't seen that Simon, I think you say Simon Sinek, if you guys haven't seen that TED Talk on the why, the how, I would highly recommend that you guys watch that. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, just send me a message and I'll shoot it over to you.
He's really good.
I
So
love that.
remind me, Melanie, when did you catch that? When did
The
you
why
catch
and the
the
how
why?
video?
Yeah.
2 years ago, probably.
Okay.
It was posted on a team page for a contest, and that's why I watched it.
Okay.
But it was really good. And so now I think back to it, but I've watched it again as my journey's unfolded more. And I still that's one of my favorite TED Talks. So
yeah. I was telling someone recently, I think I caught my why for speaking in college, and it was out of the blue. I was a little kid that sat by himself at lunch, by himself in junior high. I didn't like to say a word out loud, but playing baseball in college, went on an overseas trip and got to stand and give my testimony in Japan and Taiwan and different places. And it was like, oh, that's kind of cool. Mm-hmm. And from there, I think that's where God planted a seed for me want to share out loud in public my faith, first of all. But that's the why that I think it was planted for me then. That was in 1986. That's a deep seed. That's an anchor. You know, when we can grab the why, that's what gets us going when we don't feel like it. And
that's how you're going to make those sacrifices. And
Yep. Mm-hmm. Anyone else? Thanks, Melanie. Someone else. What did you catch in this book? What grabbed your attention? What spoke to you? What challenged you? Because I skipped a lot of stuff.
Mom, what about you? I'm going to call people out.
Call them out. Come on.
Oh, she's typing. Simon Sinek, Golden Circle. Yeah, I know,
okay.
Mom.
Golden Circle. It's really good in all aspects of your life.
You know what I'll do, you guys? I'll just, because I know I'm going to get a bunch of messages. I'll just send it. I'll just post it on the group for you guys to check out this week. I think that would be a great thing to consider. It's so good.
He does a great piece on millennials too, if that's anyone's interest. He does a great talk on millennials. He's got a great book, Leaders Eat Last.
Yep.
So anyway, he's a great resource.
Yeah.
The millennial one was pretty funny.
The millennial one was really eye-opening.
Yeah.
Really real.
Yeah, very real.
Very good.
What else did someone catch? There's a lot of meat in this chapter.
I highlighted the if there were ever a time to dare to make a difference, that whole thing, because I think that just kind of sums it all up, this whole chapter.
Yeah. Dream big.
The dream big. And,
was there a specific line in that, Marilyn?
Well, and that you're not afraid to learn by trying.
Yeah.
You know, keep your dreams big, but don't be afraid to learn by trying.
Yeah.
And I also like the part where it says you owe it to yourself to make your days here count.
Yeah.
That's pretty powerful.
Yeah. So are you worth it? Are you worth the time and the energy and sometimes the resources invested to grow?
I am. I know I am.
Yeah. Yeah.
God created me to, I'm a child of God, so, you know, it gives me comfort.
Yep. And it gives us a lot of power too.
I like this too, where, and we know this, but this is just a good reminder, especially for the newbies on tonight, is who you are is who you attract. So it's true in leadership, he says, but it's also true in every other aspect of life. And he says his mother used, and this is from 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. But as my mother used to say, birds of a feather flock together. And then if you want to be around growing people, become a growing person. If you're committed, you attract others who are committed. And so I just really like that if you're growing, you attract others that are growing. That puts you in a position to building a community of like-minded people and building your team, right? Committed people. We want faithful ambassadors that are committed to Plexus. So just remember that. And I hear a lot, I need to find my own rock star, or I want to find a runner or a faithful person. You be that person. So I think it's just a good reminder that you be that rock star and you're going to attract more rock stars to your business.
So Melanie, here's my visual of that. So on Melanie's team, are there more turkeys or eagles?
That's good.
Just saying.
No, well, I'll just tell you, I think I'm an eagle.
someone
And
challenged.
Eagles,
I'm gonna just go ahead and just say we have a bunch of Eagles.
Yeah, but I would agree. But I would ask myself that I caught that law about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And so when I looked around my team, if I'm truly being honest with myself as an influencer or a leader, I believe that principle speaks for itself.
Yeah.
And so we do attract who we are. And that's a lot of that's on us. And I think you're doing a great job in your team, by the way. But that's the visual I try to remember is, okay, Chad, are there turkeys around you or eagles? So,
well, it's a forever growing process. I mean, I have so much to learn and grow as a leader, and I'm just committed to it. So I'll continue to grow and learn and make mistakes and, humble myself to say, hey, I'm sorry, I was wrong, but just try to keep growing every day. And my motto is, pray like it depends on God and work like it depends on me. I think that every day. So just try to live by that motto and be an example. So.
And I think too, as we're growing a team, we try to make turkeys fly.
Yeah. That's a whole nother lesson. I would love to speak to that because that's a fun one. Because you frustrate the eagles when you try to make turkeys fly.
Right.
Any other catches on this chapter? It's full of good stuff. What's someone else's wisdom or insight on this? Anybody? Let me highlight something. It's a very, very small sentence on the top of page 26. We hear this all the time. But it says, become very conscious of every choice you make today so you can begin to make smarter choices moving forward. And I've learned in my own life, until I stop and pause and see where I am, sometimes I just continue patterns that aren't so productive. And again, that goes back to the very first law, which is what? Intentionality. So if we skip the whole awareness piece, those two things have to go together. We have to know where we are and where we need to go. And then we have to create action plans that are smart, we've talked about, every day. If you think about the compound effect, just like putting pennies in a piggy bank, we make deposits every day into our character and into our heart, into our growth plan. And so we have to be very conscious every day, not paranoid, but just conscious, where those habits will become habits. And so that's a really key sentence that I catch every time I read this chapter. Well, let's shift gears. I want to be respectful of time. So if you think about the law of awareness, what's the one key principle from this law that you've caught, anybody? If you were to summarize it in one key learning, what would that be?
You have to know yourself to grow yourself.
True, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anybody else? Thanks, Melanie. One key takeaway from anybody.
What about you, Jacqueline? I'm going to start calling people out to talk. I got a bunch of great leaders on here.
I would say going a little bit deeper on know yourself to grow yourself is knowing your strengths and weaknesses. And Chad, you had pointed out like the strengths finders, and I had gone through that probably about 5 years ago.
Okay.
And so one of the things I know about myself is I'm a learner, natural learner. But I'm challenged with this study because I need to be a doer.
Okay. Okay. Are you finding some ways to put action steps on any of this yet?
I mean, one of the things that I continually go back to is one thing we hear from our leaders over and over again. So, looking towards mentors, finding mentors is our income producing activities. So that's an action step that I go back to in my Plexus business is, am I doing income producing activities, or am I doing other idle things that aren't going to get me to where I want to be?
Yeah. Busyness versus productivity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's right.
Okay. So I would challenge you to think about, are there any action steps around just the discipline of reflection in your life? Maybe, I don't know. Are there any introspective disciplines that are action based, that could help spark greater growth? I think about being a reader. Leaders are readers.
Mm-hmm.
And that's introspective. That's
Mm-hmm.
an action. Or spending time reflecting. Put a time clock on it. 10 minutes a day, 20 minutes a day, whatever it is, and just maybe see how that spins some action for you. Sometimes it's even the simplest of things that are the most powerful of things. And so just stopping 10 minutes a day and truly reflecting back. What did I learn today? What was an opportunity today I missed? What can I do different tomorrow? What are some next steps? I mean, there's a way you can build action in your reflection, if that makes sense. Good observation. Thanks, Jacqueline, for sharing that. Anybody else, a key takeaway? Okay. I encourage you to think about, this is kind of spontaneous. Let me give you 4 markers to just kind of plant around these chapters, okay? I call them 4 markers. One is, what's the highlight from this chapter that you caught? Just the highlight, okay? 2, what's the key learning? What's the key principle that was taught? 3, what about this law challenges you where you know you need to grow? And then 4, what's your next step? You can use those 4 markers on every law. What's a highlight? What's a key learning? What's an opportunity for you to grow in this law? And then what's the next step? Those are some markers that you can ask yourself along the way. So that's just a framework I use for a lot of different things, but it really lays over these laws well, I think. Okay, let's keep moving. On page 34, this was a pretty significant exercise here, these questions. I hope you had a chance to do these. This is not a 5-minute deal. I mean, these sets of questions you may have to go back and spend some more time on, but please, I encourage you not to skip this step. I mean, these are foundational questions that will help you build your growth plan forward and help you have a better understanding of your purpose and your passion forward. So I would encourage you to really park on these questions and literally write these things out. Were any of you able to really spend some good quality time on this? I see Julie shaking her head. Okay. Julie, can I ask you, what was the gain for you in doing this?
What did you say? I'm sorry.
Well, I see you nodding. Thank you so much. What was the gain for you spending a lot of time on this? What did you gain from that exercise?
Well, I hated number 3. What was it? Let me, hold on. Number 3. Why?
What are your motives?
Oh, yeah, what were your motives? That's the one. Hated
What
it.
do you hate about that?
Wow. You have to get past, it was hard to get past well, you've got the money. You have, does it make you feel more important than someone? There was so much that it hit that it really made me dig. And I'm like, okay, why?
Good.
So, yeah, I didn't like that one. I worked on it the hardest, and I finally came up with, because I have been a caregiver my entire life. And it's been very, this chapter was very difficult because it hit the core of my life.
Yeah.
So it was difficult. I only had a 6th grade education. And so I had to do this to get where I am today. I would get a job and I'd look at the people around me and I'd find someone, I want to be like them. And I aligned myself and I moved up through doing that. And then eventually went back to college, got my GED. But I've been a caregiver my entire life. And I think somewhere in there I found importance with that. It makes me important. And so that question was really gut-wrenching.
Yeah.
So yeah, I did a lot of studying on that, and I wish I could say that I've came to it, but I think I'm gonna have to visit that a little bit more. So
Well, thank you for sharing that. I applaud you for being so honest, and congratulations on your GED, and congratulations on your courage. I'm glad you didn't stop learning, and I know that's still paying off for you. I appreciate your honest answer.
thank you.
Yeah. Um, Again, just like Julie said, this really park there. You can't just skim some of these questions. So if you didn't have a chance to really give that sufficient time, I'd encourage you to do that before you go forward into Law 3, because there'll be a gap there if you don't. And so I would encourage you to spend a little extra time, if you haven't already, answering those questions. I think the most challenging question for me is the whole price that I'm willing to pay. You know, it's easy to pay when things are going good. It's easy to pay when you get a little bit of return. But in those deserts of times, is Chad still willing to pay? Am I willing to pay even when no one's around? Am I willing to pay when I can't hear any applause? You know, am I willing to pay because I know it's the right thing to do, and I've been called to do it, and I'm going to do it? That for me was one of the most convicting questions on this list. So anyway, a lot of value in these questions here. Any thoughts on the will of life related to the law of awareness, or any connections there for anybody? Are you still looking at the will of life, I hope?
Mhm.
I mean, that exercise in itself causes you to stop and be aware. Where am I with my health? Where am I with my whatever? I mean, that's a step of awareness. Awareness doesn't have to be this big mystical, get in the room when it's dark and turn the lights off kind of thing. I mean, it's really just stopping and unplugging and considering where you are. And, you know, I love the phrase, be still and know that I am God. You know, that if you want to just have a life verse about awareness, I think it's Psalms 46:10. It says, be still and know that I am God. And so how often do we stop and still ourselves long enough to reflect and check in with ourselves, right? A lot of us are really good about checking in on others. Now, Julie, you said you were a caretaker. You know, I think for me, it's a lot easier for me to check on other people. I don't really like to stop and see how Chad's doing some days. I mean, I just don't. But I know for me to be at my best, I have to know where I am. And I have to know who I am. So it's just a good step for all of us to master. Melanie, that's all I have tonight. I don't know if anyone else has any insights or anything they want to add. But I think that's what I got.
Anybody else have anything else they want to add?